What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 185 of the Book Binge and my fifth episode of Author Talks. And the first one that I'm doing with an author who I did not previously have some sort of acquaintance or friendship with beforehand. So this is going to be an adventure. Of course, this week we're talking about the author of The Failures, which you can see sort of above my head up here. Say hello to Benjamin Lyer.
Hello.
How's everything going with you?
It's going good. Got my morning coffee. I'm about to talk about some books. This is about as good as it gets, right?
Oh yeah, living the dream, of course.
Oh yeah. I should say by morning it's like 2 p.m. and on the East Coast, so yeah.
Yeah, it's afternoon for me too, but like I just barely
Yeah.
got out of bed at 11. I read in the
All
mornings on
right.
weekends, so living the
I love
dream,
that.
like I
Yep,
said.
exactly.
Well, given how much I loved The Failures, you can, of course, check out the review that I did a couple of weeks ago, I guess. Maybe it's a few weeks ago at this point on the channel. I had a lot of great things to say about this book, and of course, very promptly after finishing, gave Benjamin an email to ask about getting him on the show. So I'm grateful to you for accepting the offer, and I'm very excited.
I'm really excited to be here. This is gonna be fun.
Alrighty. Well, I suppose I should ask at the top of this, how much time do you have, if you have any limit, so that I know what to prioritize and what to not prioritize throughout this?
I have some plans on Monday afternoon, so we need to be wrapped up by then. But
Alrighty,
otherwise,
sounds good.
I'm good.
Alrighty, well, I guess first off, what I want to do is start off with a couple of preliminary is probably not the right word, but my brain goes on tangents. Questions that are sort of related to The Failures, but are in a spoiler-free direction. We'll move into a spoiler-filled more direction later, and then come back around to some other miscellaneous topics at the end if we feel up to it, if that sounds good to you.
Sounds great.
Alrighty, well, first I'm going to ask a few questions in each of these different segments from other people, so the friends that I bothered in various Discord servers and other stuff like that to give you. So first one is actually from the owner of the Sun Eater fan Discord that I help moderate, Orion. Asks, why did you specifically ask Christopher Rocchio to do a blurb for The Failures?
Christopher. I haven't met him yet in real life, so I don't know which he prefers. But
He does prefer Christopher, actually.
Oh, great. Okay, cool. Thank you. Um, but he was with he's with I'm published with DAW, so he was published with DAW as well, and we were talking about when you have a book coming out, you workshop people that might be willing to give you a blurb, and I had just read the first book of Sun Eater, and I was like, whoa, man, this is cool. I like this a lot.
Very
And
based.
yeah. And it's like it just has that special something. Every once in a while, you read a book and you're like, okay, I want to see what this where this goes. I was really impressed by it, and then uh, my editor was like, oh, I know Christopher. Like, I could reach out, and I was like, I saw he was at that time really, yourself and others were really helping out with Sun Eater, and it was sort of blowing up, and I was like, oh, that would be wonderful if I don't know that he wants to, it. That would be wonderful to get Christopher. I really love his book. He's also like very involved in the community. It would just be good on so many levels, if he was able to. But he's also an extremely busy human being. So all to say, he was kind and gracious enough to give the book a read and seemed to like it a little bit. So, but yeah, he was up near the top of my list of people that I wanted to see if they could read the book.
Well, that's awesome to hear, because it was on account of him that the Sun Eater Discord, the fan Discord that we run, basically, we started doing a read-along type of thing recently, and The Failures was actually the first book that we decided to do it, largely on account of Christopher's recommendation. So he's no small part of why several people in that server read it and loved it. So I hope That sounds good.
Yes, if I ever do get a chance to meet him, I will be sure to thank him profusely.
Oh yeah, I've mentioned it to him a few times. It's really great. So the next question comes from Paramita. She asked, "What was the most difficult part of constructing and conveying the lore of the Wanderlands?"
Um, getting it all to fit together. World building is the easiest part of writing for me. It's the most fun.
Interesting.
Yeah, I like to both the world of the failures and then a few other things that I am working on. Um, I almost like to imagine how things could be better. Build a utopia, right? Um, that's fun. That's enjoyable. Like I like to just build a world that works the way I wish things would work, and then
Don't we all?
to make yeah, um, to make a story out of it, I like to think about how uh, selfish, greedy, power-hungry human beings would inevitably break that utopia, um, and kind of destroy it. So this is I'm not saying the Wonderlands is a utopia by any means, but that's the very genesis of like building this world and building that stuff. But all to say that that part is really like fun, like that is sort of like the candy of the job for me. Um, but coming up with like the characters and their motivations and what they want and what they need and how that all fits together and the interlocking pieces requires, at least for me, like I don't just have this awesome master plan where I sit down and I know exactly how things are going to work. I have to do a lot of writing and rewriting and throwing things away and try like smashing the action figures together until they kiss or like fight or figure out like how this piece, and especially with the structure of the book, that was easily the hardest part for me, is just figuring out. I knew I wanted all these things and I had the world that they were in, but figuring out how they were all going to fit together was extremely difficult and took, frankly, many years.
Well, I'm not horribly surprised to hear that because the intricacy of the structure, which I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit later as well, is one of the coolest parts of the book for me. But I'm surprised to hear that the world building is one of the easier parts for you because it seems like really in depth the vibe that I got from this book. It was like, I mean, I'm pretty sure you watched my review. It was like the thing that I said, if you like world building, read this book. So,
Yeah, I it's odd to say. Easy might not be the right word. I think it's just the part I enjoy the most. I've always loved, ever since I was a little kid, you know, I like imagining buildings and looking at a rock thing and imagining the castle that could be on top of it and like what kind of people lived in the castle and what kind of government they used and how do they kill each other and all that good stuff. Um, so it's yeah, yeah, maybe not easy. I've certainly put a lot of work into it, but it's the most fun, I guess.
okay, that's a good way to put it. I found the world building parts of my own writing to be some of the more complicated because I've not been great at doing the whole history thing and trying to figure out what came before. I'm doing like the story, and what came before is just kind of inkling through along the way, if that's the right word. It's not, but I tried.
Well, that's I think there can be tremendous value in that of only using what you need. And there's certainly no one right way to write a story, and complicated hard magic systems and complicated hard world buildings certainly have their place. Obviously, I love them. But I'm also a big, I love me a good Alice in Wonderland story where everything's a metaphor and it's all just whatever it needs to be to serve the character's journey. I think that has a lot of value too. So, you
Yeah, I guess nice voice crack. I guess it is all basically a spectrum, but moving on to a few of the more spoiler-free questions that I had. This one I suppose I could have asked a little bit earlier to save some of the jump into the magic question. How has the general reception and buzz of the failures been for you? Exhilarating, breathtaking, horrifying, even?
Yeah, all of the above. I certainly thought I was prepared for it, and I am certainly not prepared for it. Um, it's been really like when you make something, and I've done music and a little bit of film work, and I made a video game, and but this book is the thing I've worked on the longest, and with that I cared about the most, and you spend most of that time imagining and hoping that somebody will care about it, right? That they will see the thing that you see or feel the things that you feel, um, and having at least some people sort of do that, respond and see the things that I was really hoping that they would see. Like it's like showing your friend a movie you really love, and then like if they really love that movie too, you're like yes. Um, so that's been absolutely the coolest part of it. Um, Learning how to use social media effectively has not been as much fun. Um, but
Look, I'm
the
a zoomer, and the social media part is the part that I find most intimidating. So like, I feel you,
yeah,
man.
I think for everybody, but as certainly not a Zoomer, it that part can I'm learning to find the fun in all that stuff. But yeah, finding the people that really like the book for the what I wanted it to be is overwhelming. It's an amazing experience. I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Well, that's awesome to hear. Let's see. Going back to what we talked about with Christopher Rocchio's blurb for the book, I remember him talking to a few of us specifically and mentioning on some Q&A streams he does, because he does one of those every month. He cited FromSoft world building as a large part of the vibe that he got from it. Was Dark Souls or Bloodborne or anything like that a major influence on the world building for the failures?
No, it was not. I only got into the that series with Elden Ring. Um,
Oh,
so relatively recently. I mean, I knew of it. I was aware of it. But I've gotten those comparisons quite a bit, and I'm very flattered by them. But they surprised me a little bit, um, because the games are so luxuriously like dark, and
they are dark
I
fantasy.
yeah, I guess the Wonderlands to me is obviously dark. There's no light there, but
Right.
not as not as not quite as tonally dark, as I regard the FromSoft games. But then I played Elden Ring, and I was like, oh, like there's so many bright little spots too. So I think it's an apt comparison, but I can't. I think we were maybe inspired by some of the same stuff. Uh, Miyazaki, I think, was very inspired by Berserk, an old like that
Right.
old like hardcore manga. Which I was more inspired by Blame. That was a big touchstone, but they were sort of like close cousins in that like vibe and tone and stuff. So I think we both were pulling from similar things and inspired by similar things. But I, yeah, I was late to the FromSoft games, so I can't claim them as an influence.
Well, either way, I mean, I think the comparisons are apt, but I also have not played a whole lot of the FromSoft stuff myself, so I think Elden Ring is also the one that I put the most hours into, ironically enough. Um, did you utilize any music or anything like that during your writing sessions? I know that some authors will have like certain writing playlists on Spotify or whatever. Do you have anything like that for while you're writing?
Yeah, I almost exclusively listen to non-vocal post-rock when I'm
Honestly,
writing.
very good decision. Post rock is a vibe.
Yeah, like explosions in the sky, um, Russian circles. Like I'll just find a post-rock playlist and put that on. Anything with too like strong of, especially lyrics, like my brain is listening to those, so it's got to be kind of instrumental. Sometimes I'll listen to like classical and stuff, but I like I like some loud guitars and a good mid-tempo rock beat. I don't know, it just gets my fingers moving. But I usually keep it pretty low, like it's just a low drone. I've heard some authors that are like blast in their fucking metal while they're writing and stuff, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome, but I
Literally
can't do
talking
that.
about me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I,
But
I
I also
listen to a
do.
lot of instrumental prog metal when I write, but I like prefer to have it from
Oh,
like a Bluetooth speaker coming from like the side so that it's like it's there, but usually
yeah.
it's stuff that I'm so familiar with, my brain easily tunes it out, so it's like a fan for
Yeah.
sleeping, you know, white noise.
That's such a great Yeah, exactly. It's funny the way our brains work, isn't it?
I guess so. Um, let's see. What was my next note? I've already lost my spot in my notes. For anybody who's watching this video who hasn't read the book, either click off now at this point because we're going to be moving now into spoilers pretty soon, or skip to the miscellaneous section at the end if there is one. I absolutely recommend reading The Failures, but for now, I think we're going to jump into a couple more spoiler specific questions if you're ready for that.
Oh,
Or at least some of these questions are a little bit more general as well, but if you want to go into spoilers for them, you're free to. Um, Doom, another one of the moderators on the server, but someone else who I actually met just a few weeks ago, and we talked a lot about this book the day we were leaving the trip that we had together. He asks, what are the influences behind Twistcraft, Silver, and Black/White magic and their respective interactions? It
oh,
might be a deep question early on.
yeah. I'll try to keep this relatively short. And there's certain um like easy answers are great, but the truth is that some of these concepts I've been thinking about and sort of poking at and working on since I was like 18. And we don't need to get into numbers, but that was a long time ago. So some of the inspiration, like once in a while, I'll read. I remember I was reading the Chronicles of Amber recently, which I hadn't read in years and years and years, and there was some little thing in that book that I was like, "Oh my god, I totally stole that," and then forgot about it for years and years. That was a total influence that I just never would have thought about or listened to. So this is not comprehensive at all, but I think it was it's this is gonna sound a little silly, but honestly, Minecraft is a huge. I got very obsessed with Minecraft, but I grew up. My dad was in construction. I worked in construction for many years. I used to love. My favorite thing in the world was going out in the woods and building forts. And I'm not particularly talented at making things with my hands, but I'm fascinated by it. Um, and I think a lot of it, especially the twistcraft. Like many other people, I fell in love with like gears and clockwork all around the same time when steampunk was becoming a
Mm,
thing. And but I always wanted a little. I wanted it more, magical. I wanted it to. I like the idea of being able to just with hard work and determination be able to build really fucking awesome stuff, even if it takes you years and years and years. Um, Sorry, this is a very very wandering answer, but it's a hard one to it's a tough one to answer coming right out the gate.
that's fair. I could have put it for later, but
No, no, no. It's good. I'm just like, oh man, that is an interesting question. The interactions between I'm mostly talking about Twistcraft, which is the very mechanical magic. But then early on in the drafts, I started to really wanted to explore these themes of like the work you have to put in to something versus something maybe being a little bit easier, a little bit more um, ephemeral. Like so, the silver magic is to me it's almost like electricity. It's awesome and it allows so many wonderful great things, but we lose something too in not having to make things with our hands or not having to work in certain ways. And I'm not making a statement on whether one is better or not, but
right.
the difference between the two was very interesting to me. And then the black and white, I love a good chaos magic. I love a good weird. We don't know what it is yet. Um, it can do some really crazy stuff, and then hopefully the explanation behind what it is and how it's used will be fun for book three.
Book
Uh,
three, planning that far ahead, huh? Well, I know that while I was reading, and this probably a lot of why Doom was inspired to ask this question is there's really not that much about any of these forms of magic and what that entails in the book, but is one of the, various things that the readers left to wonder about and ask questions about, that you kind of string us along for. And I really liked the way that it was handled, especially as certain things start to come out a little bit. Because for me, at least, when I was reading the book, like the first part or two or something, you get like a couple of mentions of Twistcraft, in one ear, out the other. And then all of a sudden, like part three of the book, it's starting to become a thing. It's like, wait a minute, how's this actually work? And then you have a really great chapter with it. That goes pretty in depth, relatively speaking. I really appreciated the magic stuff, and I think that readers of fantasy, but with a little sci-fi twist, are going to be really interested in the way that this specific magic works.
Yeah, I hope so. That'd be great. I certainly was fascinated by it, and I think that's, as a writer, that's mostly what you want to do is try to get other people to like the stuff that the weirdly specific stuff that you like.
I guess that's a fair point. Long Sun Malrubius asks, I saw an interview that you originally envisioned the Wanderlands as a Cosmere type shared universe. What made you focus on the stories of the failures, monsters, and killers specifically?
Um, I have a very basic writing rule, which is that if it doesn't stick in my head, I just lose it. Um, and I think a lot of like young authors that love the idea of a big shared universe, this huge encompassing work, the Dark Tower stories, or I used to love. There's a old book by Orson Scott Card called The Worthing Saga, where he had spent most of his youth writing all these stories in this huge universe and stuff, and then he abandoned it. But it's a compelling thing for a young writer. I think it's a really big, ambitious, fun idea. But the further I got into it, the more and more I just kept coming back to these certain characters and these, you know, writing stories set in the distant past of the Wonderlands, or like connected by these black doors, and all of these ideas I had just weren't interesting enough for me to put the work into writing them. And these stories were, and it was much more enjoyable, fun, and compelling to me to try to figure out how to fit these stories and characters together in a small handful of locations and in this world, in this time, than tell this big connected set of stories, which frankly Sanderson is doing way better than I could ever do. So, I'll let him do that.
All right. Don't try to hog the market when you know you can't, type of thing.
I'm, yeah. I mean, how do you? No, I mean, I'm other people are going to do it awesome and great, and if that's your vibe, you should absolutely like. Sanderson doesn't have the monopoly on big shared universes, of course, but yeah, it just wasn't. The more and more I worked on it, the less and less I wanted to do it, and the more I found joy in focusing in as opposed to expanding out.
That's a totally valid point. I wouldn't have expected that as an answer, and maybe something I should have considered before I started working on my own stuff.
You got to follow your own path. You got to go wherever your heart leads you.
Bellamarie's asks, Hi Ben, loved the book. One of the key threads in the book was trying to plot the timeline of every POV, and twists and reveals were tied to this craftsmanship. Will the next two books follow a similar format, or will they be more typical adventure stories to move forward the plot set up in the failures?
I would love so much to someday write a typical adventure story. Oh, it sounds so fun and easy. No, the second book certainly will. Uh, I think at the in spoiler territory, by the end of book one, you kind of know uh, where everybody is relative to each other in time, but you don't know how they all got there. So that'll certainly need to be explored. I hope that there's some more fun surprises, secrets, and twists on the way. Um, the third book will be a little, obviously it'll be the final one in the series. I don't see any more books in this universe happening, so all the
Yeah.
threads will need to be tied up. And I'm less certain about what exactly the shape of that one will be. It certainly might have less shenanigans with timelines, since they're all converging. But I've got some fun stuff planned, so I don't think you'll be bored, but we'll see.
Interesting. Yeah, I found the timeline aspect specifically like probably the most exciting part of reading the failures. It was one of the things that made it so compelling because I get through like the first few chapters of part 1 and you're like, "Okay, I think these things are happening concurrently, but this one's obviously not." And then the more you get into the book, the more complicated it gets until like the last 100 pages maybe, and then like you start realizing where things actually fit together, but even then not everything is clear yet. So if book 2 is going to follow a little bit of that moving forward, I'm excited for that.
Yeah, yeah, I'm excited to finish it. Yeah.
You know what,
I'm
fair.
working hard on it now, but it is not yet done.
Of course, yeah. I mean, it's pretty soon after book 1. What am I expecting you to drop them one every 3 months or something?
I mean, some folks do. God bless them.
Oh man, there are some people. You gotta love those type of people.
Yeah, just machines. I love it.
Well, Classy Wagon asks, what inspired the feral children, and why was it that toy under Sid's bed in Toy Story 1?
Ooh, that's a good one. Maybe it was. Uh, what inspired that's part of the problem with these inspiration questions is that I have such a bad memory and I'm such a prolific at thief that I just forget where I stole stuff from because I've stolen so many things from so many people. And then I also do like I love doing a lot of homage like to the things that I love, and it all gets very confusing. But the Feral Children actually like I had written. I would get really sick of writing in the Wonderlands back in the day, and I would be like, I'm starting a completely new thing. And I wrote this short story that was just about lighted cities on a dark plain, and the feral children were screaming from the battlements, and it stuck in my head for I think a year, and then that was actually when I decided to turn the lights out in the Wonderlands, and I was like, that's so cool. I want to do that with the whole thing. Let's throw everything away and start again. Because I like these little feral children, sons of bitches. Um, and kind of retooled the world from there. But I don't remember exactly. I don't know. I don't have a good. I'm sure like Toy Story was probably in the back of my brain somewhere with the little mechanical some bitches.
I mean, it's really interesting that you just said that it was part of what inspired, so to speak, kind of shifting focus on the Wonderlands. Because I've had so many moments where like you just come up with a random idea or something clicks in your head. It's just like, wait a minute, this shifts what I want things to do. That's actually a better idea.
Yeah, I think that can be one of the great joys of writing, and we have I think writers as tough and as lonely as the job can be. I think it's a cool thing that like we have the ability, even though it can be hard, to go, yeah, screw it, I'm throwing it out, I'm retooling. Like nobody is waiting on this or depending on it. I have the ability to completely change what I want to do, in a way that like somebody working on a movie or a film with a lot of other people, a lot of money involved, blah blah blah. You're not as flexible. You can't just go, oh, that's a cool idea. I'm throwing away 200 pages and I'm just gonna start again, right? You can't really do that on feature films unless you're like Tarantino or whatever.
Or unless you're
Or
making The Emperor's New Groove, apparently, because I had no script.
oh, okay, that's actually a good point. Yeah, I guess maybe you can do that sometimes, but
I mean, it's kind of a fluke, we'll say.
yeah, I think it's rare.
Okay, well, another question that I'm actually really keen on hearing your answer because I have no idea what my answer would be from Paramita. If the Wonderlands was made into a film or TV series, what would be your dream cast or crew?
Um, crew would probably be the folks that did the um, Altered Carbon series on Netflix. I loved the production design of that show. Oh my god, so good. Um, Casting, I think for Sophie, like Kristen Stewart would probably be my if I just had a dream ability to cast anybody I wanted. Kristen Stewart would do. She's just got that vibe, you know. Florence Pugh would be amazing.
Well, Florence Pugh.
Uh, yeah,
He would be
and
great.
then uh, they're starting to get more traction. They were in Murder at the End of the World, Emma Corrin, and I think they prefer they. Right? Um, and then we're in the new Deadpool and Wolverine movie as like the Professor X's daughter or sister or something. I can't remember. But they're amazing. But they have that intensity and vibe that I'd love. And then the only other one I really see clearly is I think Jack Quaid from The Boys would make a great gun.
Honestly,
Yeah.
great decision.
Yeah. Oh, and if any of y'all saw Shogun, and if you haven't, what are you doing? Go watch Shogun right now. Well, finish the interview and then go watch Shogun. But at night, my brain is completely blank on that actor's name, but the main Lord Takanaga or whatever, like
Let
that
me see if
actor
I
would
can look
make
it
a
up.
great deader, make a great deadsmith. But he's also like, just one of the best actors working alive today. So yeah, of course he'd be good at it.
Oh, Hiroyuki Sanada.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
You know, not a bad pick at all. There have been actually, I was just on a call the other night with some of the other Sun Eater Discord moderators. We were talking about fan casting for Sun Eater stuff, and one of the
Ooh, yeah.
characters in book 2, Howling Dark, which I think you're reading right now,
I'm
he's our
halfway
fan
through, yeah.
cast for one of the characters. So
Oh, nice.
I'm
Which one? Oh,
uh
if that's not
I'm not sure
no,
if you've met him yet.
okay.
So I'm not going to
No
say
spoilers,
anything.
no spoilers.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
you'll be excited. I mean, he's a great character, so that's
All
just
right,
how
can't
things
wait.
go. Pyramido asked a third question. The Failures is a beautiful, thematically apt title. Was it your first choice for the book?
Yes, that's always been the title. Um well, maybe I shouldn't say always. Ever since I decided what this book was going to be, like what it was going to be following, it was the title. And actually I had to fight for it. Some of the folks I mean, rightly so, were like, that is a pretty bad downer of a title. We're worried that it won't help you sell books. Nobody said no, but they were like, you might want to think about this. It has a pretty negative connotation. I was like, yeah, I
That was
know.
the first thing my mother
That's
said when she asked me what the book was
yeah,
that I had a new author interview for. I was like, it's called The Failures. And she was like,
yeah, and
classic mother reaction.
yeah, but even non-mothers I've seen in reviews and stuff, it certainly turns some people off,
Oh, interesting.
which is totally fine. I think if you don't have something about what you're doing that some people don't like, you're doing it wrong. But it was always just strongly like, that's the name. I'm gonna fight for it. Like, if some people don't like it, that is totally fine. But like, I just love it. It's yeah.
Well, following in a similar vein to The Failures being the title for book 1, you're working on book 2, which is called The Monsters. I'm pretty sure the reasons for that are a little bit more obvious.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Um,
Just
thematically and however wise.
do you have a pretty similar naming convention in mind for the third book? I'm assuming you probably do.
I think the the second book is definitely going to be called The Monsters. The third book, I haven't talked about this with anybody, so I might be getting myself in trouble here, but I'm potentially would like to call it The Killers. Um,
I'd be
but
down.
we'll see.
I'm into it.
Don't yeah, don't hold me to that. But
Well, I
that's
won't
into
hold
the
you. I'll just be crossing my fingers because I already
okay.
like it.
Yeah.
I mean, based on the killers being my favorite POV from from the book.
Oh, that's great.
Um, let's see. Here's a few more questions. These ones mostly for me. How much time did it take you to differentiate and separate the pros of the various different POVs? Because you're switching every single chapter in the final version of the book. What was the writing process like between different POVs and organizing all that?
So again, most of my answers are not as exciting as I would like them to be, but I wrote all of the POVs and am doing the same for book two. Would, I'm guessing I would do the same for book three, um, in sequential order. Like I wrote all of the killers in one go in one Word document, and then I wrote all of the monsters in one go in one Word document. Um, same with all of them, and then uh, I sort of write a lot of very obvious like chapter breaks, so I didn't have to break it up that way. But then I just took the chapters and I just started shuffling them together, seeing how they felt, seeing where the like reveals lied, and then of course over the course of writing this book, I've rewritten so many things so many times. So once I got a basic shape and idea, then I started editing it like all together and then like trying to like play up some of these comparisons, reveals, themes, like blah blah, doing all that like kneading the dough work, I guess you call it, to bring the flavor out. But in terms of differentiating the prose, like I tried to like get the voice in my head, like the tone, the voice, the I don't know if it comes through as much, but like I had a very distinctive sort of vibe I was in my head in while I was writing a POV. Um, and then yeah, just shuffled the deck together and see what we got.
I mean, that seems like the easiest way to compose a book like this, given how many reveals are there. I'm not surprised at all to hear that you had to probably rewrite a lot of things a lot because the reveals and their specific timings in accordance with one another is a not insignificant part of like the back half of this book, especially just really working. Um, so yeah, if you wrote them all
And
sequentially and then put them together, I can imagine there being a lot of like continuity glitches that you just have to fix.
yeah, yeah, and shuffling things. I up until the very last thing, I'm still moving chapters around, and I have to give plenty of credit also to my agent, his assistants, my advanced readers, especially my editor Betsy Walheim. Like they helped a ton with like, hey, this doesn't make in an earlier version you said something that made all the rest of this make sense, and now that's not there because you rewrote it, and blah blah blah. So they were very helpful in helping a lot of the character moments and especially a lot of the reveals and the secrets work correctly. So they deserve plenty of credit for that.
I'm sure that wasn't an easy process at all because even just like as the reader for a first time reading through, and I said this, I'm pretty sure in both my Goodreads review and in the video review, I was like, this is going to be a great book to reread because there's a million and a half things I know I missed, especially in the first half, like little references that make some of the reveals later a little bit more obvious, we'll say, that I'm looking really forward to catching now that I know how things fall together.
Yeah, that's I mean, the idea of somebody reading your book, taking the time to read your book even once is amazing, and the idea that they might be uh, motivated to do it again is about the best compliment that you can get as a writer. So, thank you. I hope if you do that that you have as much fun as we are both hoping you have.
Well, I can anticipate I probably would, and not necessarily to butter you up even more, but I did say it at one point that I've never been the type of person to be inclined to reread books in a series leading up to the next book's release because I'm a very, very slow reader. I do not have that kind of time or mental energy really to do that kind of thing. I would get so burnt out so quickly, but I'm debating doing it with the failures because I think it'll be so worth it for the monsters. I would be very surprised if it wasn't.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Well, another question. Okay, never mind. We basically already talked about the structural decision, so let's not ask that one. Um, I know you said there's a little bit of complication with the inspiration questions, but do you have any answers for who or what inspired your main character POVs between James and Chris, the debtor, Sophie and the other killers, and then of course Gunnar and Jackie?
Um, yeah, well, so Sophie is easy. Sophie is one of those characters that just you like she who shall not be named said that Harry Potter walked into her head just complete, and Sophie was the same. I was kind of uh I was smitten with the Golden Compass, and I
Mm.
loved that. Lyra is just one of the greatest characters, YA characters, or any character. She's such a complex, wonderful little human being. But I was like, man, like saving the world, like, it's such a, no spoilers, but it's a bittersweet ending to that series. And I was like, what if like you saved the world and it just ruined your life? And Sophie just went bing, and I was like, just saw her, 30 years old, drunk, degenerate, you know, fuck all this shit. Um, and So Sophie just sort of popped into my head, and that was the inspiration. Probably most directly is from Lyra from Golden Compass, and then um, Gun and Jackie. I think didn't have as much of a. There was just more like a little thought experiment of like what would two actual human beings from our day, time and age, which was a little while ago now, like how would they actually behave if you went through a portal into a weird fantasy world, right? Like you don't have any phones, you've been stimulated your entire life, you'd probably be bored as hell, like, and especially if like you don't have the narrative contrivance of like a Gandalf showing up and handing you a
Right.
quest, which is what
Not having
always
the old
happens.
man mentor
Yeah,
trope.
right. Or like any portal fantasy, you get transported to the world and then you're immediately involved in the adventure. And I loved that idea of just like two bored people from our world in this strange place. Which as a more mature writer, I'm like, I can't believe I tried to make that work. That's wild. That shouldn't have worked. And I'm sure for some people it does not work, but uh, it's yeah, it was certainly a choice. But they're two of my favorite characters to write, and I love them desperately. So I'm glad we got here. Um, the Debtor is so clearly and obviously, and wearing it on my sleeve, an homage to the um, Roland of Gilead, the gunslinger, and in the first, mostly the first book, the gunslinger.
Right.
I think
He's a little bit more of a detached, mysterious type of main character.
yeah, and it was that archetype that he is in that first book, and then he becomes so much more nuanced and wonderful and amazing as the series goes on. But it was that first book that kind of like gunslinger archetype that I wanted to play with. Um, and then James and Chris, the two lost boys, are like I had two cousins when we were growing up, and they're like my one younger cousin was just the most stubborn, like he would just fight and fight and fight, and he would never stop fighting. And then his older brother was a lot more intelligent. Um, and then I'm like there. It's a weird amalgamation of all three of us in our childhood together, and like the the push and pull of our relationship. We're almost more like brothers than cousins. So that's their starting place was very much like us, just being out in the woods, building forts, doing stuff, fighting, beating each other up, you know, hugging it out, doing that whole late '80s thing. Um, and yeah, I think that's all. We ran down all the inspirations. We made it.
We ran down the characters that I brought up. I did want to circle back around slightly to
Sure.
Sophie, especially because I think Sophie is such a fascinating character from the very moment she is introduced on the page. I think me and then like several other people who were reading the book alongside each other kind of agreed in the first couple of the Killer's chapters that we're like, I don't know how I feel about this because Sophie has this really like YA young adult book hero vibe, but 30 years removed and very jaded with everything, as you put it. Like, what if you saved the world and it just destroyed everything, ruined your life. I love the way that you had the dichotomy with these, and then most especially with James and Chris, their type of arc together, where they come together and then separate, and then of course Gunnar and Jackie following a trajectory sort of somewhere in between the two. I just really liked the dynamic of how all the different characters felt, just as a personal personal opinion.
That's thank you. I love that. That's kind of what I was hoping. I was hoping somebody would feel that way. So
Yeah, I'm
thanks.
I'm not sure how many other people shared my opinion that Sophie's my favorite character, but like far and away, I loved Sophie.
It's a funny thing. I noticed this with even just my friends and my advanced readers, but it seems to be holding true with the reviews and the feedback I've gotten, where people have their favorite character, and then they usually have a not favorite character, like one that they don't like, um, and they are very certain that they're right about that, and I love that. Oh my god, I love that. I love the love and I love the hate. Um, the dead are especially people like some people are just like, I really love this book. I like Sophie. I do not know why this stupid thing is in here that I hate. I don't like. It's clearly the worst part of the book. It almost feels like it was written by a different person. I don't like it. And then somebody else will be like, oh man, Sophie's so annoying. She swears too much, but man, that dead are so good. Like it's clearly the best part of the book. Like blah blah blah. And I love it. I'm like, yes, yes.
These exact
This is great.
conversations had happened in the Discord actually.
Yeah.
This is the reason why I actually mentioned why I wasn't sure how popular like my take is, because the Deader is actually my least favorite of the POVs, but coming around to the end of the book, the last few of his chapters are like so huge and have such huge ramifications for the next book, got me really excited. But many of the other people in the Discord, the Deader is easily their favorite. And then I can also see why people would be annoyed by Sophie. Her language
Yeah,
just I'm so tied to the fact that she spurs way too much.
yeah.
it
I
felt it felt
and
so visceral and real to me. It's how I talk
but
with my
that
friends in real life, so
yeah, yeah. Which is what them both them and Gunn and Jackie. I think they talk like real human beings would talk, but that has definitely been a turnoff for a lot of people too.
right.
There's been a bunch of people who bounced right off the book because they're just like in that fantasy setting, it doesn't feel right for them, which I completely respect. But it's a choice that felt right. It would have been difficult to write those characters in like a PG or PG-13 way.
I don't think
Um,
Sophie works as anything less than
yeah,
NC-17 or R basically. Yeah, like even
right,
PG-13 you don't get enough of that.
yeah. Um,
That
but it's
snark, you don't get her snark through if she's not swearing, I think.
I I tend to agree, and thank you for saying that. But yeah, but it's really cool. See the things that people like and don't like, and the the worst thing that can happen is somebody's just like, that's fine. I don't really, you know. The book hasn't gotten a ton of mid responses. People tend to either really like it or really hate it, and I'm like, both of those are awesome.
Well, as long as you're okay with that kind of response, I guess it works. Because some
Oh,
people get
sure.
way
I
too
mean,
hung up on stuff.
sure. Well, we're in this business to make people feel things, right? So,
Yeah, if they feel nothing, you kind of failed on that regard. Um, to what degree of sci-fi to fantasy scale, like sci-fi over here and fantasy over here, would you classify this book? Because I have my own arguments for that distinction, but I'm curious to hear what your thoughts were.
well, first I have to do the boilerplate um, genre genre distinctions are basically pointless. Star Wars is fantasy, and uh, there's certain
Your
Brandon
little baby
Sanderson books
Christopher
that I'm like,
Rocchio right now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I love people that embrace that. I think is if you're telling a story about human things with human characters, or even if they're not human, but it's about human things that uh, but sci-fi versus fantasy can be useful in some ways, and I'm being a pedantic jerk by I know what you meant, right?
Right.
So but I do have to say, like, yeah, there's a certain aspect of that I'm like, it doesn't matter a ton to me, but I, man, well, okay, so one of the things when you call yourself, you make a fake last name of liar, you have to answer things honestly, or you're just betraying the whole thing. So whether or not it ruins it for people, the Wanderlands is a very science fiction world that is told in a very fantasy way. Um, and I wouldn't say it's the hardest of science fiction. It's definitely some hand waving wee woo and technology and stuff that is probably not going to be possible with our current physics systems, but it's definitely not, you know, ooh, this place exists and there's certain rules and I'm following those rules. It's okay. That's all I'm gonna say.
You know what?
Spoiler.
Fair enough. Because
I know we're in spoilers, but I don't want to spoil, like, the books you haven't read yet.
that is a good point, and this actually leads right into my next question as well. Because the argument that I made in some of my reviews for the failures was that if you compare it to like Sun Eater, which is more in that space opera thing, which is like science fiction setting, you read it, it's space and all that kind of stuff. But the storytelling is very easy for both sci-fi and fantasy fans to get into. I define the failures more as like what you would typically find in a fantasy book with a lot of sci-fi set dressing and ideas. Most particularly the world being a machine idea. I'm guessing you're going to expand on this in future books, right?
Yeah. By the end of book 3, you'll know what the Wonderlands is and what it's for. Whether or not that's satisfying for you, I don't know. I really hope so,
Well,
but
I hope
I
so too.
I know what it
I knew
is.
like it's only like very vaguely mentioned a couple times in the failures to some degree as a reader who's like not aware of the background. It's kind of easy to forget that that's even a thing. I had to remind myself when I was going to your website to get your email actually, and just the little blurb that you have on the website, it's just like, oh yeah, this world is a machine, isn't, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's something that comes out more in the future.
Yeah, and I don't want to put shine too bright of a light on that because it's not. You'll certainly find out, and it certainly is important to why all this stuff is happening, but it's not the reason why the books are written. The books are written because I want to tell the story of Sophie and her band of killers and how they all got to where they were and how they maybe find some hope and maybe not. Um, and like the world building, I want the world building to serve that and not the other way around. Which again is something that can be a little hard for me because I enjoy the world building so much, and it's easy to let that take over. And I'm fortunate enough to have a couple like advanced writers that don't or advanced readers, couple close friends that don't really read fantasy or science fiction at all, and they're able to offer sometimes a perspective of like, uh, yeah, I don't really care about how the twisty magic works. Like, that's fine. I wasn't bored, but like, I don't really care about that. And like, oh, the giants are part of this thing. Yeah, whatever. Like, who did Sophie punch? That's what I want to know about. So that sort of gives me a little like, um, it's like a anti nerd pill where I'm like, okay, okay, yeah, keep it. You know, remember the characters are king or queen or prince or whatever.
Very valid response. Well, one final spoiler based question that I want to ask is what are your favorite scenes or reveals or whatever else in the book? And are there any that you're particularly excited to write with book two?
Probably my favorite. I don't know if it's my favorite scene. My favorite reveal has always been the Mr. Vutch reveal. Um, Something about that was just so fun to do, so fun to write. It seems like there's some people that like get it ahead of time, but most of the time it's a bit of a surprise for people, and it's a little bit. It's just a good twist or a good reveal is like a magic trick, and when like you pull it off well, you're like, oh, that's so satisfying.
I
So
found it
that
I found it funny because you
yeah.
go from part one and basically ending off with the Convox, and then it takes until part 4 before that little reveal
Yeah.
happens. So it's like a very long delayed punchline.
Yeah, it just makes my little black soul happy. I like that one. Uh, I think the probably my favorite scene in the book is, um, even though it took it took so much work to get right, so many iterations. But like when Sophie and Avi are sitting, looking at the trees with when the butterfly lands on Sophie's hand, that was
It's a very
um,
surreal moment. Probably the most surreal
yeah,
one
yeah.
of the book.
Um, Yeah, that's probably my favorite scene. In terms of like stuff I'm excited to, it's almost impossible to talk about stuff that I'm excited to write in book 2 without giving the kind of spoilers that I don't want to give. I will say that I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm new at this. If I'm making mistakes, my older self can look back on this and be mad and be like, Ben, don't say this kind of thing. But I'm very excited that in book 2, young James is going to be a very fun teenager, and that has been so much fun to write. So
Knowing
that's been
what I
my
know from the end of the book, based off of the time gap from where the Lost Boys chapters kind of leave things versus where the last couple chapters imply where they end up with the Hot Halls War or whatever it's called. I
yeah
forget off the top of my head.
yeah, you got it.
I'm excited for that like 10-year period or something like that we don't get.
Yeah,
Well,
20 years.
20 years, right? Yeah. I I'll take the hint. I'll take the hint. But that's all we need to know. For now,
Yeah.
I suppose we can come out of the spoilers and talk a few more basic stuff because still have a little bit of time. I'm assuming you watched Patrick Leo's review of the book.
Oh, of course. That was like one of the best days of my adult life. It's awesome.
Such a legendary reviewer. I'm sure
Yeah,
everyone whose book is reviewed by him knows.
yeah,
Yeah,
amazing.
he was one. He didn't ask a question, but is in the Sun Eater server, so he did mention when I started probing for questions from people. He was like, "I knew you'll love this book. My favorite debut of the year so far," with a little smiley emoji. So I figured I'd pass that on.
That
And
makes my
I
heart
have to
glad.
agree with him, even though I've only read a few debuts, two at least. I don't know how many other debuts I've read.
Yeah, I wish I could read everything, but time is getting more and more precious.
Relatable and unfortunate. Another person in a different server named Preacher asked, "Why hasn't everyone read this masterpiece, Ben?"
You gotta keep talking about it. Um, books are um, books are a funny world. It's one of the few art forms that kind of grows slowly, and people that enjoy something, talking about it is way more important and impactful than a huge marketing campaign or anything like that. So um,
I mean,
yeah, I think the there's a cool little group of people, it seems like, that like this book and this world, and that's just overwhelming to me. And obviously it's awesome if that little group of people grows.
yeah, I hope so. This is one that I hope to see blow up a little bit more, especially as a fan of Sun Eater, which has more recently really started to blow up. Because I got in on this when book uh in between books 4 and 5 being published in 2022 is when I started reading it. But then it really started to hit right about a year ago when Petrick again and Daniel Green both reviewed Sun Eater. So I'm hoping to see something similar happen with this, even though it's a little bit more condensed, just the one trilogy. You said you don't see any other books coming out in this universe. Do you want to expand a little bit more on that, or what's motivating that decision rather than other authors, you know, getting in on their
Um,
successful property and making it last forever?
Yes. I mean, that is that. Like, if you look up any advice about how to succeed as an author, that is what you're supposed to do. But I am way too flaky and bored and want to do way too many things to commit to one set of stories for the rest of my meager life. Um, but that kind of stuff is more driven from a like when I first sold the series, it was open ended. I didn't know exactly how many books it was going to be, and then my agent was like, "Well, why don't we just say it's going to be three? It's easier to place a trilogy." But he was like, "But we don't have to really hold to that if the thing goes." But I kind of sat down and mapped out an arc for the books that I was just like, it was like that bell rang deep in your chest, and you're just like, yes, that's what it is. That's what it needs to be. Like, and it's not that I'm totally opposed to. So the story is going to be wrapped up. Um, there won't be anything to tell after book three in terms of like timeline or nothing that I would be interested in writing.
Okay.
And there's a ton of I think all the important stuff from the history it will be sort of told. I do not like prequels. It is very rare that there's a prequel that I think is worth the effort to make or consume. Every once in a while there's a Better Call Saul, but for the most part I'm not a prequel guy. It's just not something I enjoy or I'm attracted to. So I doubt very much that I would write prequels. And in 10 years, when I'm putting out my third 7 volume trilogy set in the dawn ages of the Wanderlands so that I can buy a lake house, I hope that you all come and yell at me and make fun of me for doing that, because who knows? I'm sure. It's also like if people's desire is a powerful motivator, and if like people ever responded to this world and these characters enough where they really wanted more, I don't know. I'm just saying right now I'm like absolutely not. But you know in my life I've usually been made a fool of anytime I make blanket statements like that, so let's just land on we'll see.
Understandable. I'm a little bit more on the ambitious side myself. With my own writing, and this is gonna sound absolutely absurd to literally everybody who hasn't been following along to my ramblings for a couple years now about my own writing. I actually am kind of like in a weird middle spot where my writing ideas are pretty big and ambitious, but they're also limited in that I don't plan to follow them after that. The problem is that 19 books is a lot of books. It's split between 5 series, to be fair, so it's like, got its arcs. I have my limits, but after those 19, I don't plan to do anything in the world. So I guess I can see where both sides come from, right?
Yeah, we're basically on the same page. Yeah, it's same thing,
Yeah,
3 books,
19 books.
19.
Yeah,
It's are
exactly.
you familiar at all with uh Marshall Ryan Maresca and the Meridane series?
I don't. One second. Can you say the name again?
Marshall Ryan Maresca, and it's the Meridane series. They're published DAW trade paperbacks. But I think he's up to 20 interconnected. He puts out like 3 or 4 books a year. He's just one of those machines. But
Let me do one little quick look up.
he's a great writer, wonderful person.
Okay, no, I'm not familiar. I thought I had a friend who was reading some of those books actually like really recently, but it's a different
Yeah.
similarly titled series. So no, I'm not
Yeah,
familiar.
they're I can't I've not read all of them, but I've read a couple. They're great. Yeah, it's a cool world, cool characters, cool world building.
But he has a lot of books in it. Yeah.
Yeah, it just he's I remember when because it took me a long time. I met him right when I first sold sold the failures, and then it was a very long stuff related, for many reasons, but it was a long wait, 5 6 years to publication, and he just every time I would see him, I'm like, you wrote like 7 more books in the time that I just did one edit, of an existing book, like I don't, man. I wish I had some of what you got. But so I'm saying like, get you got it. You got this.
Yeah, I can't imagine I'll be that quick. Right now, I'm just outlining all 19 books so everything fits, and then I'll start
Yeah.
actually writing them. So I'm trying to get ahead of the curve. I couldn't imagine
Yeah.
writing something like The Failures where everything's so interconnected because one of my outlines recently, and I think I actually said this in the video review, is one of my outlines that I finished working on was one where like the POV changes every chapter. Um, and I was really worried about how that structure was going to be. I thought I'd have to like rewrite the outline because I don't want to write a book and have to rewrite a book. I'd prefer to do the outline stuff first. And now I'm a little bit more confident that I can make it work as is if I have the ability.
Yeah.
So I
I
appreciate
have
you for that,
confidence.
man.
No problem. I need whatever I can do to help.
Alrighty, well, just a few more questions to kind of finish things out, some more general stuff, a couple things we probably referenced a couple
Sure.
times throughout this video. When did you begin writing in general? Any early ideas that you think you'd want to pursue someday after the Wanderlands? I know you mentioned some of the Wanderlands, originating somewhere around 18 years old or something like that.
Yeah, I started writing basically with this. I think I had written like a couple short stories in a high school creative writing class, but I s- I just famously, I won't go into the whole story, but I saw the original paintings of Dinotopia by James Gurney, and at the Natural History Museum, and I was just like, "Whoa, I want to do that. That's amazing." But I'm not very good at art. The only thing I'm kind of good at is words. So this is the tool I have. I'm gonna try to build something like that, to build a world. Um, so yeah, writing since I was about 18, but I was at that time, and for a long time I considered myself mostly a musician. That was like my main uh, passion. And then I really got into filmmaking. Then really got into video game design. Um, and then sort of a friend sat me down and was like, I was really struggling with like what do I put my work and attention into? Like what do I put my 1,000 hours into? Um, I was tired of doing a lot of things at once, and she was like, I mean, the entire time you've been doing all this stuff, like you've been writing, you've been working on this like world and book, like not all the time constantly, but you've been doing that in the background this entire time. And I was like, oh yeah. um, so it was a little bit of an epiphany, and after a little bit of soul searching and whatever, I decided to like, you know, I didn't necessarily want to be a writer. Um, I wanted to be a rock star or a famous film director or a whatever. Uh, but when I looked down deep into the black depths of my soul, I saw a writer looking back at me, and I was like, okay,
The
let's get
beer
real
spit
with
in your
it.
face and told you to actually
Yes,
acknowledge
exactly.
him.
Yeah. Told me to get to work. So yeah, I like. It's one thing to say like, oh, I've been writing since I was 18, but I was not writing like you would think of an aspiring writer. I wasn't writing like that the entire time. But I would have these huge bursts of like 2 or 3 months where that's all I did, and then I wouldn't write for like 5 or 6 months. But then probably about 10, 12, 13 years now is when I really like kind of tried to buckle down and learn the craft, learn what I was doing, put all these characters and threads and whatever together, and then throw it all away and start again, and then throw it all away and start again, and ad nauseum until here we are.
Yeah, some of this is a little bit too relatable because I, of course, make YouTube videos. I now put way too much time into writing reviews for books that I'm going to do video reviews for as well. I have my fiction writing stuff in the background of everything. I also do plenty of other stuff. So
Right.
I can feel the being sick of doing everything all at once. But I kind of want to hone in on a couple of those ideas as well because I can remember I've wanted to more or less be a writer since actually let me just pull up something random by Rick Riordan. He was the one back in fourth, fifth grade that made me realize, like, oh, I want to write. And he was the reason why, basically. But then come around high school time, ninth through 12th grade mostly, I got really hooked into the idea of trying to do music. The problem is, I am not very good at instruments. I think I'm an okay vocalist if I'm singing my own stuff, not other people's stuff. I'm terrible with covers. And I'm an okay drummer. But beyond that, I'm not really a musician. So eventually I had to swallow that bitter pill and be like, I'm not going to be in a band, or I'm not going to be a musician. What's something a little bit more achievable? And finally, things kind of came together, and doing this writing thing has been a little bit more attractive since then. That's where my storytelling has started to manifest, because when I wanted to be a musician, I wanted like all the albums to be concept albums. So storytelling aspect to them. So I think that's kind of gone through different iterations.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that sounds like the path. I think that's, as an artist, figuring out who you are, what your voice is, and what you want to do with it is, it's not easy, but that's a huge part of the journey. So I love that you're homing in on it, figuring it out. It'd
What
be
was
great if we could do everything, right? But
Oh man, if only there were time in the day.
yeah.
What was your experience like doing film and game related stuff? Because early on, or at least several years ago, there was part of my writing journey that was like, I want to incorporate this with games and movies too, before I realized how unfeasible that actually is, especially as one person. So I'm
Yeah.
curious to hear your experience since you've done it.
Well, I mean, I should say, like, especially the film stuff was on a very amateur level. We would do the weekend film thing all the time, and won some awards with that. And then I made a short film, and it helped other people out a lot. But it was by no, I wasn't like in Hollywood making big budget feature films.
Of course, it would have
That's
been
not
the
where we
same for
were at.
me too. One of my
Yeah,
friends and I wanted to do movies for a couple years there.
yeah, yeah. It's really fun. It's a very compelling thing. Um, Same with music. I had a band, played all the time. The band broke up. I did a solo album, which was also a big concept album that was like interconnected to blah blah blah. But the oh my goodness, the thing happened that I've been worried would happen, and I forgot what your original question was because I just started talking.
Oh, it was what was your experience more or less like with the filmmaking slash video game side of things?
Right, right, right. Sorry. So it was both with filmmaking, and then so we did actually put out a VR game. Me and a few guys like worked on that pretty hard for about 4 or 5 years. Um, and making things without an audience is difficult when there's nobody there paying attention yet, right? And building that audience and finding people that care about what you do is it's tough. And I realized pretty early on with filmmaking that I didn't care. I really wanted to be a filmmaker, but I didn't really want to make films. And I wasn't spending my time doing that, and I wasn't prioritizing it. I wanted to be the thing, but I wasn't doing the stuff to become the thing. And so I sort of had just be
Oh,
like,
how
well,
relatable that is.
right. And like game design was really, it was almost like an opportunity came up, and so I really had fun pursuing that. But it was also the same thing. Like since we finished that game, like I haven't touched a game engine. It's really fun to do that project. I loved it. It was wonderful. Some of the best experiences of my life. We got to go to a bunch of conventions and won some awards and all kinds of fun stuff.
What
But
game was it, if you don't mind me asking?
oh, not at all. It's a VR game, and nobody cares about VR anymore, right?
My friend has
But
VR, so he might give it a shot.
it's a game called Straylight.
Straylight. I
And I,
feel like I vaguely recognize this name. I'm gonna write it down. Just
yeah. Um,
just to look it
it's
up
really
for
fun.
fits and giggles.
It's got a kick-ass soundtrack by a pretty popular Twitch streamer named 88-bit. Um, yeah, it's fun. It's a fun time. But I think it's easy to look back on the time in film, video games, all all the stuff I've done as being like wasted. But when I sit down to write, I feel like I'm pulling from all of that, and like learning how to design levels in a video game taught me a lot about how to structure chapters. Like it's all, everything you do and learn is helpful and can be used in whatever you end up like being your sort of main thing, I think. Um, so yeah, I'm not sure if that totally answers your question, but
I mean, it kind of does. I related a little bit to like what I said with wanting to tie things in with film and gaming, I'm reminded because it's the main project that I work on. I call it the Reign of Ash now, and one of the series slash books within it is called Silent Reign. But originally, Silent Reign was a different type of concept that incorporated film and music and games alongside books for a big like multimedia type of storytelling endeavor. Then a few years after that, I kind of like had to, you know, water it down a little bit, take some of the ideas, and I turned it into a trilogy. And that trilogy eventually adapted into the trilogy that it is now. And then I've created the rest of the Reign of Ash around that. So it's just kind of fun listening to the way some different things change your ideas over time, how that affects from a storytelling perspective, I guess.
Yeah, I think one of the things we love about science fiction fantasy is we can do anything, right? But then sometimes our youthful optimism
Gets
our
the better of us.
ambition, our reach can exceed our grasp, right? Um, and I think at some point, if you want something to exist in the world, you do have to focus down, and you have to sort of pick one set of stories, pick one trilogy, pick one thing, focus on that, understanding that that might be the open door that will lead to the other stuff, right? That might be for a long time I had to shut music and film and all kinds of stuff sort of out of my life to get this book done. But I always was hopeful, I still am hopeful that this book might be an open doorway that maybe I might get to do a little bit of stuff with film or games or music. There might be a little bit more opportunity. But none of that was going to come about unless I focused down and I got the work of doing
Actually
this
did
book.
something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I don't know if that's helpful for your own journey, but I think it's a common thing for ambitious artists to overwhelm yourself, and it can sometimes be really helpful to be like, okay, I'm not saying no to all this stuff, but I'm saying I can't do it right now. I'm just gonna focus on this thing right now. So
You know, that's a fair point. Um, Another thing that this was something that you mentioned a couple, at least a couple times in this video, I think. You cite The Dark Tower by Stephen King as an influence for the book. And obviously the doors that appear in this are pretty obvious homage to it. What is your favorite Dark Tower book? This is coming from me because I think this was the first extended series that I read and covered on the channel. Was one that I did a couple years back, and I love The Dark Tower. So I'm curious to hear your answer.
well, you're gonna love this because do you remember not that long ago when I went on and on and on about how much I hate prequels? Easily my favorite book of that series is Wizard and Glass. I love that book.
Not a wrong pick.
I'll just I will just go and pop in and just read that book. I love the whole series. I listened to a podcast where somebody who'd never read it was reading along with somebody who had. They did a whole podcast about the entire series, and it was amazing. And I love all of those books, but Wizard and Glass is just almost a perfect novel to me. Like it's so good. I
I
love it.
haven't gone back and returned to it, but I have said multiple times if I was feeling the Dark Tower itch at any point, I'd read parts 2 and 3 of Wizard and Glass because that's the
Yes.
backstory section is right there. It's most of the book.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing and really made me emotional at the end of that section. Actually, I hit a little bit too close to home in certain ways. We'll say,
Okay.
just angsty teenager self coming out in there.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
I have the unpopular opinion of The Dark Tower being my favorite book in the series.
That's not a wrong answer. I think I understand why it is as polarizing as it is, but
Right.
I personally think that ending is absolutely genius. I love it.
Well,
So,
see, you remember earlier when I said I'm a really slow reader? This holds
mhm.
true, but that book was good enough that I read all 250,000 words of it in 7 days. And like that is
Wow.
such an insane pace for me. I don't think I could do that again if I tried. I was just reading
Yeah.
so many hours every day that normally I don't do because it would drive me crazy. So that's how much I enjoyed that one.
Isn't that great when something just grabs you that tight? It's awesome.
Yeah, and I still recall it so fondly. Like, I have like no negative opinions about that book. Like you said, I understand why people find it polarizing. I haven't read The Stand, but I understand why people would have issues with one
Right.
particular thing in there. I understand why people have issue with the Crimson King and with Mordred and whatever. But like, I loved that book, man,
It's awesome.
and I
Yeah.
found that it made the whole series better. So that's fun. Um, Similar, sort of related question. What are your top 3 to 5 books that you've read in general, just of all time?
Well,
If you could answer that,
sure.
because I don't think I could.
So with books and movies, I have books, movies, and music. I have three very clear. Like my number ones are so far above everything else that it's not even fun. Like nothing will ever assail these. I don't think. My favorite band is Coheed and Cambria. Nothing else is ever gonna get
Amazing
close.
pick. Amazing.
Yeah. Prog rock. Uh, my favorite movie is Drive with Ryan Gosling. Nothing else will ever even get close. And my favorite book is Cryptonomicon by Neil Stephenson. Like I
I
read
had a
that
few
book
friends
like
who just read that recently. I was going to join that read along, but I did not have time. So
it's I mean it is a difficult book. It's dense as hell. Like
and
most
long.
people I've tried to get yes, most people I've tried to get to read it like bounce right off. And it is also only science fiction in the most vague sense. Mostly it's like historical fiction. But I just love it so much. It's the best language writing of all time. Uh I would put um again, problematic authors, but it's hard not to include Ender's Game up on a high list. It was just so influential on me when I was young. And then it's funny. I'm doing two non-genre picks, even though like I mostly read science fiction fantasy. It's pretty rare that I read something that's not. But Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry is just a
I
stone
hear
cold
literally
masterpiece.
nothing but good things, except for like one person in one random Discord
Uh,
server I'm in who did not like it. But
Well, every
most everybody else loves it. So
some people are just wrong about things.
that's
But
actually one that I've wanted to come back to. Several friends had a read along of that in like 2022, the whole
yeah,
Cowboy Quartet, as we call that 4 book series. Um,
yeah.
and I've wanted to circle back to it for a long while, and I want to prioritize it sooner than later.
It's I mean you'll know within 50 pages if it's for you or not. But it is grand, wide scale storytelling. Like I don't care who you are. You might be a pretty good writer. You might have your moments, but and not you specifically. I'm saying any writer on Earth. You might be pretty good, but you will never be Larry McMurtry in 1985, man. That like the quality of the prose in that book is so insane. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking about it. I can get
Don't want to gush about it for about
yeah.
15 years or
Y-
anything. But no,
I
I've also heard specifically people say he's the best character writer in that book. And that's
oh
coming
absolutely
from people
yeah.
who love like Stephen King's characters and other stuff like that, because King is also great with character. But
Oh yeah yeah. But no, I mean absolutely iconic characters. Like they'll just live in your head for the rest of your life.
yeah, I'm very excited to circle back around to it at some point. Another question I'm curious about now that I didn't have originally written. What's your favorite video game of all time?
Oh, whatever one I'm desperately addicted to right at the moment, which right now is a game called Satisfactory. Um, I'm really like anything that lets me like build stuff is gonna be my jam. Even though I don't play it again, I probably don't know that I would ever even boot it up again. I lost. I mean, and the failures took probably about 4 years longer to write than it should have because I discovered Minecraft, and I was more addicted to Minecraft than I will ever be addicted to anything in my entire life, even if I try heroin. There's no way. Like I would just lose. It was
Oh man,
it was
that's.
bananas. Um, but I do, but I yeah I don't
But you're super into
favorite.
that sandboxy type of
Yeah, same. Like anything, I love Factorio and Satisfactory, any sort of like factory building game or game where you have to craft things and build things. Just reminds me of being a kid and building forts in the woods.
I was about to
Uh,
relate it to that. Yeah.
yep. But I do have to say I originally played Elden Ring with a mod that made it a lot easier, and I liked it. It was good. And then I was watching, I think, like Carnage play it or whatever, where like every time he died, he had to gift subs, and it cost him like $50 every time he died. And I was like, I
Oh
just
man,
was like, dude, I gotta play this game for real. I gotta beat it for real. And
with
I
no
did, and I was
difficulty tampering.
well, but that's the thing is like the easy mode is built into the game. You just gotta
Yeah,
go work for it and find it. And of
you just got
course
to
I
get the
did.
build. Do bleed build
I
for the
got
base game. Yeah.
I did absolutely got the Rivers of Blood katana and went all the way in. But that was a profound experience. I'm tempted to say that's like easily one of my favorite games, but like that was intense, man. I loved that in a way that's much different than like, oh, I like to build bases and forts and other kinds of games. So anyway,
Right. Different
yeah,
vibes for different situations.
yeah. I right now I'm gonna say Elden Ring. I loved that game. Loved that game.
Good pick. I'll accept it. I played like 60 hours of it, but then had work schedule stuff go on
Yeah.
because I work at a power plant, and every year there's an overhaul, and that
Oh
involves
man.
like shutting down one of the units and like doing a whole entire stuff with it.
Yeah.
And I started playing it foolishly a month before overhaul, and overhaul meant working like 70 hours a week for about 5 or 6 weeks. Um,
Yeah.
which meant that I did not have time to play for about a month and a half. And with FromSoft games specifically, or really any Souls like, if I spend more than like a couple weeks away, I cannot get back into it.
It breaks the spell, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like just something does not click and I have to start over.
Yeah.
So I know that if I play Elden Ring again, I'm gonna have to play all few hundred hours of it at once, or
Yes.
it's not gonna
Yeah.
work. So I've been saving
Yeah.
myself.
Right. It's a time commitment.
Yeah, for the most part, I feel like I'm a single player story game type of person. I'm the uh and I know the console wars thing doesn't really exist anymore. The last couple years it's kind of turned off mostly, but I'm very much I have PlayStations because they're first party single player story games are such my thing that that's what I play. So like my favorite games are like The Last of Us and the new God of War games, stuff like
Ooh, yeah,
that.
yeah.
The Spider-Man games, I really like those. Very simple.
Yeah. I've been a PC gamer for way too long now, so if it's not on PC, I most likely haven't played it. But fortunately they put the God of Wars on PC, so they were
Yeah, Sony's
amazing.
starting to port some things now, which is really
Yeah.
great. I'm excited for it, except that Last of Us Part 1 port is awful and makes me very sad.
That's what I've heard.
Because, yeah, the remake of it on PS5, it made my favorite game even better. Anyway, I have a
Someday.
I have a PC, but I do most of my gaming on console just because of what I play. Um,
Right.
Another question, since we talked about Sun Eater a few times, and plenty of the people watching this video are Sun Eater fans, I guarantee it. How are you feeling about that so far? How you said you're about halfway through Howling Dark?
Yeah, yeah. I mean it's great. Like it is
Yeah,
it
better
where
be,
it
otherwise I'd
wears
have to kick you off the channel.
right. Um, not gonna bite the hand that feeds right now. But no, but genuinely like Christopher's a great writer. Great characters. I like that he allows especially Hadrian to like be a whiny little bitch sometimes and like not
You are in teenager Hadrian arc right now, even though
yeah,
he's
and
like 20 something in Howling Dark. It doesn't matter.
I like that it's frustrating sometimes. I think some people feel frustrated by a character and they think that's a wrong feeling to have, and I think it's like, no, you're in the hands of a master who, like, I feel like he knows. I haven't read further on, no spoilers, but like he knows what he's doing. This is great. This feeling is going to pay off for something, and I can't wait for it.
Yeah, the
Um,
back half of Howling Dark is gas. That's all I'll say.
so that's what I've heard. Like the beginning. what? So maybe you can answer. Was there a novella or a story in between the first and second book?
Well, technically, but not for Hadrian's arc. There is a
Okay,
novella that takes place between them, but technically it takes place after chapter 22 of Empire of Silence. It's Hadrian's brother, but that's a different thing.
gotcha.
I could
Um,
I could totally send on Discord the reading order for the whole series with the side stuff if you were interested. Because I'm
yeah,
working with Christopher on revisions for stuff as well,
oh, nice.
doing
That's gotta
copy
be
edit
exciting.
stuff.
Uh,
It's been such a trip. It's actually making my writing so much better.
that's great. Yeah, you learn from people who are doing it well, right?
And he's doing
Um,
it chef's
yeah,
kiss.
he's one of the best working today. So I'm really excited to get. I wish I had more time to read because I did the first one on audiobook and I was like, I don't think I got the best experience. And there's a little part of me that wants to just like stop reading Howling Dark, go back and read the first one on the page. Certain books I love on audiobook, and certain books the way my mind works, I do better on the page, and I think Rakio's better on the page for me.
That's
Um,
fair. I
but
know the general audience really loves Samuel Rukin's narration, and
oh, is
they're like he is Hadrian to me. For me, I do most things eyeball reading. So audio
yeah,
is like a specific type of thing. Even though I own all the audiobooks at this point, I don't think I'm ever going to do that. Not just because
right,
revised versions of the series is coming out with the special editions, but because I've now internalized Hadrian after 6 books and
yeah,
reading some
yeah.
of those twice.
Um, I like the narrator. I love the narrator. For me, it's more if I'm listening to an audiobook, I also tend to be doing something else, and so audiobooks usually for me are better something I've read before or something that's like Stephen King is great on audiobooks.
Mm.
Amazing writer, but it's very like clear and digestible, like what's happening and who and motivations, blah blah. Where Rocky is definitely a little bit more baroque and intense and like a lot of little references.
He's
I felt
very
like I missed.
intentional with his prose.
Yeah, I feel like I missed some texture and some. I caught all the big main story beats and all the wonderful character stuff, but I feel like I missed out on an aspect of it. Um, so yeah. All to say, I'm really enjoying Howling Dark. It was a little slow to start, but I think it was just because I was a little like I didn't retain enough from the first book because I did it on audio, and then I was a little like, wait, what's going on? Where
I
where are
suppose
we? So once
I could have answered part of your question a little bit more clearly as well. There isn't anything written in between Empire of Silence and Howling Dark, but there are time gaps between the books, and very
yes, yeah,
intentionally
yeah.
so.
But
Yeah, and Howling Dark is meant to be that first chapter very discombobulating, for lack of a better term,
yeah,
to basically gauge and tell the reader, like, hey, this is something to expect. There are time gaps here. There are parts of Hadrian's record that are lost,
yeah.
missing elsewhere. So that's basically what the deal is with that.
Yeah, and stuff he's intending you to like. He'll sort of tell you what happened, but like in context clues and
Yeah.
little verbal drops and stuff. Once I realized that's what he was doing, I was like, oh, I love this. This is great. So I'm all in now. Um,
Yeah,
but
Howling Dark
yeah,
is tied for my favorite still, but most people say Demon in White, the third one's their favorite, so
that's what I've heard.
I'll be very excited to
So
see how you feel moving on. But a lot of people say that Disquiet Gods, the new one, is the best now, so you
hey,
know.
that's all. I can't wait to find out.
Yeah, I can't wait for you to find out too. It's my favorite series, so
That's
it's great
awesome.
when more people pick it up. I'm always happy about that.
Yeah.
Let's see. One final question, and this one is going to be it might end up being a little bit more personal, but when I was actually getting ready to email you about coming on the channel, I was scanning through your Instagram, and it was like a few hours after you made the post about your little tattoo of the X on your hand and that caption. Do you want to expand a little bit more on that story and what that means to you as somebody who has a history of struggling with procrastination as well? I'd be very keen on hearing this.
Oh man, yeah.
I
I
know it's a
mean, I could
lot.
do. No, no, no. I could do 2 hours on this. It's something that's very like it's so close to my heart and something I'm so passionate about that it's almost hard to talk about on social media because like it's, and even here, because just because it's hard to narrow the fire hose down to
Mm.
whatever the appropriate trickle is. But I think um I don't like the term mental illness because it implies that something is automatically bad, and I think it's just different flavors of people, but some flavors of the way brains work can be difficult. To live normal lives, to have normal relationships, to uh, make art. Um, and I think most artists uh, have some of those colorful flavors to their personality, to their brains, and every good thing like creativity or the ability to imagine a world or create a character out of thin air or do great dialogue, every great thing usually has its downside, and sometimes that manifests as depression, and sometimes that, you know, um, more difficult modes of thinking and thought, which is a long way to say a lot of it. A lot of artists struggle with just waking up in the morning and getting what they need to done. I certainly do. And it can be a really hard, life is hard at its baseline, much less trying to call down the holy fire and bring a new thing into the world, especially when you're just, you wake up and you're like, oh, I feel like nothing I've ever done is very good, and I'm sad because of this reason or that reason, or I just my bones feel like they're full of lead today. And how am I going to write this awesome sword fight with these larger than life characters when I am struggling to remember what sunshine feels like, Um, and so it's something I struggle with a lot. I lose a lot. I just lost probably like a week and a half to just I got very little done because I just wasn't feeling good. And then you get into a loop. You fall down into sort of a black hole. It can feel impossible to climb back out. Um, and then you do, and you're like, oh, why was that so hard? Why can't I just wake up in the morning and get this stuff done? Um, and it's of course not. It's just not that simple or easy. And I don't really know what point I'm trying to make here. I'm just sort of rambling on the nature of uh, spicy brains and procrastination. But I wrote that post basically because I grew up in a sort of a different time, definitely with a little bit more of a stoic mindset of like you don't burden other people with the way you feel, right? And I love that our modern age and some of the youths are much more embracing like uh, different ways of being, thinking, acting, dressing, who you are inside, who are you are on the outside, and part of that is sort of embracing like, um, again, I don't love the term mental illness, but in in some ways like um, different modes of like your how your brain works, uh, and I just wanted to kind of share. That's something I struggle with. I've gotten a few people that have reached out and just been like, thanks for saying that. I deal with some of that same stuff too, and it's easy, especially in our. Okay, I'll just say this and then I'll wrap it up. I told you it was sort of a fire hose. Um, it is very easy to. We all know that. Look at people on social media, or look. I know I look at the books behind you on there, and I just, to me, I'm like, what Brandon Sanderson's a machine, blah blah blah. I'm sure he has bad days. I'm sure he has to struggle to like get to work sometimes. I'm sure that some of the names on that book might struggle with stuff that we have no clue of or idea of. That's their part of their journey. Scott Lynch, Liza Lamora is one of my favorite books of all time, and when Scott Lynch sort of like came out and was just like, I struggle with a lot of stuff. Writing is very difficult for me. Like that was so freeing to me to be like, oh, I'm allowed to like, I still have to get to work, but I'm allowed to feel bad about this sometimes. And that just made me feel a lot lighter and a lot more hopeful that maybe I could do it someday too. And yeah, I mean, I didn't write Leslie Lamora, but I do have a book on the
You
shelf behind your head. So,
you do have a pretty good book that is on very many shelves at this point.
oh,
I
that's
just
all.
wanted to say I really liked the sentiment behind it, especially with the procrastination side of things and the X meaning, crossing off a day where you did the thing and that stacking up. I really loved that sentiment because I especially remember, my teenage self who did not care. I was very apathetic for much of my junior high and high school years. Um, and a lot of that manifested in just not doing the thing, not caring about the work. To some degree, because the way that scores and everything was weighted for me in high school was such that as long as I did good on the tests, I didn't have to care about anything else. So that's what I did. And I realized that that actually isn't very good for me mentally. To you mentioned a kind of spiral, and that's basically what happens when you stop caring. It eventually that it spreads out into basically everything. So I really liked the sentiment that, hey, I find this X important because it marks that you did the thing, and the more you do the thing, it gets better, at least as far as like productivity and stuff is concerned, because I do a lot of stuff at this point, and people are like, some people tell me that I'm a machine at this point, and I'm like, well, no, it's just because I put very specific deadlines on stuff, because if I don't have a deadline, I don't do the thing. Um, so I liked the sentiment because it kind of helped me remember that there's a reason that doing the thing works. It's we all have to find our own way to do the work, and I found it relatable.
It's awesome. Okay, yeah, yeah. It's we all have to find our own way to get the work done. That's a great way to put that. But you gotta do it. Have you ever come across The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield?
I know of it.
Yeah, I'll say it, if there are anybody listening or watching that struggles with procrastination, especially in a creative sense, The War of Art is uh, it's it's the thing, man. It's 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 good. It's a great starting place. Um,
Okay.
it's a good way to rewire your brain and look at things in a different way. Even if you ultimately wind up being like, well, that the specific his system doesn't exactly work for me, it still like shakes you up enough and gets you to look at things in a new way that could be helpful. It was certainly helpful for me and almost every single one of my creative friends.
Well,
Actually, even non-creative friends. I know tons of people who love that book that are like, this book is how I opened my yoga studio and stuff like that. So
well, you know what?
anyway,
That's
so
great. I'll take that recommendation and I will put it on a list somewhere.
yeah.
And
It's
then
also very short.
I can believe it. I'm gonna look it up on Amazon after this, I'm sure. Let's see. One final question. It's going to be the obvious question that, of course, everybody is going to be inclined to ask. What's progress looking like for book two for the monsters? I'm not going to ask for a
I,
timeline for release because it's probably still very early, but
yeah, it's part of that is out of my hands. In terms of the publishing business and all that stuff. All I can really worry about is getting my draft to the editor. Um, my writing process is so bananas and chaotic and wild and weird that it is very hard to give progress reports. Like if you asked me 2 weeks ago, I would say like, oh, I won't even give you a percentage, but I'm doing very well. I have a bunch of the story broken, a bunch of stuff written that I'm like pretty happy about. And then last week I threw almost all of it away. Not almost all of it. My editor's out there in the world having a heart attack right now. But to say like the amount of words on the page went from a whole lot to like not that many. And that sounds like, oh, well, you have to start again or that's not good. But to me, that's amazing because what I did was write my bad first drafts or I explored ideas and I was like, oh, now I didn't quite know what I wanted that to be. Now I know exactly what I want it to be. Now I can write the draft that is like, or section of that story or that chapter that is like if not the final version, like it's gonna be good. So I'm, in a certain sense, I lost a whole bunch of words, so progress went from like here to like down to here in my for my emotional state and the way I write my like me knowing what the book is. I'm doing great. I'm so happy and so excited. So, uh,
Well,
I don't know if that was
that's
a help.
good. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
it's good to be happy with where things are at. So, I'm guessing you would describe yourself as a little bit more of a gardener versus an architect when it comes to writing, to use the George R. R. Martin terms.
I don't think I've heard those. I like that. I always hear the term like outliner and pantser.
Yeah,
I'm absolutely
I like the term outliner. I've never liked the word or the term pantser, so I prefer
yeah,
gardener and then outliner. So I
yeah.
like
That's great.
mix them myself.
Um, I I think I'm a little bit more of a throw myself off a cliffer. And then you hit the like just keep throwing myself off the cliff until I start flying. And I never know quite how many times I'm gonna have to throw myself off the cliff, and it's scary every time. But I just got to do it. Um, but definitely, I'm not an outliner. I respect and love outliners. I wish I was an outliner. Oh my god, I would be able to write so much faster. But I have to write a lot of bad versions before I find the right version. But it's also part of, I think it gives maybe at least the failures a certain kind of texture that I like. So it's worth doing for me. But
I mean,
I still wish.
I can say I would find certain parts of writing the failure is very difficult to do regardless of your approach, as far as like reveals and stuff are concerned. So, I
Well,
respect that.
yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's even the way I said that like seemed like I don't think either one is better or worse. I think it's
Right.
what works for you. Like what how do you do it? As long as the story's good at the end, how you got there isn't that important. As long as it works for you.
Yeah, I
But
guess that's fair. I mean, I've kind of implied over this discussion that I'm a little bit more of an outliner, but it took me a
yeah,
while to discover that. Many of the stories that I wrote, I also wrote a couple stories for English, like my freshman year English class. The reason that I got like 99% in that class because the teacher really liked my writing. That's how things go. I wish I still had those stories. I don't know where they disappeared. I sent them to myself, but I don't have them now. Either way, I discovered a couple years ago when writing a novella, I was like, when I was exploring more of an outline type of vibe, whereas before that I wasn't really outlining, and then I realized how much better that worked, and so that's why my current project of 19 books is all the outlines are being done first. So it's
that's great.
it's
Yeah,
such a strange thing how different we all are in our work process. It kind of
yeah,
goes along with my having to have a deadline for myself, otherwise I don't do the thing, you know?
yes, yeah,
Even if I don't technically have to meet the deadline most of the time, if I have it there, it means I get it done.
yeah, yeah.
Part of what I had to do for school too, I guess. But, you know, I think that kind of wraps up most of the things. I don't have any other questions. Anything else you wanted
All
to
right.
talk about for whatever reason?
Uh, no, I think we covered just about every topic under the sun. I like your little animals back behind you.
Oh yeah, those are
Little figurines.
I
They're great.
I had the animals back there, the bears especially, because they just happened to be in the background in a couple early iterations of my videos set up back approaching 3 years ago now, which sounds weird. And then I rearranged things a little bit so that they weren't actually visible anymore, and a couple people were like, "Where are the bears?" I was like, "Okay, I guess they're gonna be in the background now." So
Yeah,
plus Falca
you can't go.
from Ashes of
Yep,
Man, that cover.
yep.
Kieran's such a good artist.
Man, even before Rockio was really on my radar, those the covers of those books are just best in the business, man. Like
Howling
they would
Dark as
catch my eye,
well.
like, what is that? Like what are these books?
Oh yeah, you actually
Uh,
see the if I could point the right spot on my main camera, the Howling Dark Russian version, the naked hardcover of that in there.
oh,
I got the Russian set of the series because the naked hardcovers are so good. Even normal
that's awesome.
the normal jackets are really high quality. I love them, but yeah, Kieran's art is just amazing.
Yeah,
So, well, best
fantastic.
of luck to you on future writing and feeling
And
good
to
about
you
the
as well.
stuff, because I've
Yeah.
actually written like 3,500 words over the last few days on my next outline. Finally
Oh
got it
yeah.
started after a couple week hiccup, of course, for obvious reasons. So feels good. Looks like we're both in pretty good spirits about where we're at.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm glad for that. Either way, thank you to everybody who watched this approaching 2 hour discussion. If you made it all the way up to this point, I really appreciate it. It's really nice, and I had a great time talking with Ben. Be sure to check out The Failures wherever and whenever you get a chance. It's available, and I really like it. I heavily recommend it. If you want to know about more about my thoughts specifically on the book, I do have a video review on the channel from just a few weeks ago, and a 2,500 word spoiler-free review on Goodreads as well, so you can check those out. I'll probably link both of them in the description for ease of access. But with that being said, thank you for joining the channel. I think I'll see you guys all in the next video.
Oh yeah.